Hey there, and welcome back to Truth Talk Thursday. I'm Jenny Kuemmel, host of Mama Drama and Trauma, and this week we're talking about something that every person who's ever had their whole world fall apart will understand: learning how to breathe again. January 2024 was the first time in a long time that I could actually hear my own breath, because at that point, everything around me had finally gone quiet. The noise of the holidays was gone, the decorations were all packed up and put away, and the boys were back in school, and it was finally just me. Me, the silence, and the truth that I was standing in the ashes of what used to be my life. And somehow I was still breathing and I was still surviving. The quiet after the holidays. You know that feeling when the world finally slows down and suddenly the reality you've been trying to outrun finally catches up with you? That's what January was for me. The lights were packed up and put away, the house felt emptier, and the noise that had filled December was replaced with stillness. There was no more rushing, no more pretending, just quiet. And in that quiet, I could finally hear my own thoughts, which was both comforting and painful all at once. It was like standing in the middle of a room that used to be full of laughter and realize you're the only one left. But instead of falling apart like I had in the earlier months, this time I was standing taller. Maybe not strong yet, but a whole lot steadier. The grief was still there, but it didn't own me the way it used to. I could feel something shifting, like I was starting to move from surviving the loss to slowly rebuilding myself after it. I remember those January mornings so clearly, sitting on the couch with my coffee, watching the light come through the curtains, and realizing that somehow I wasn't drowning anymore. The pain was still there, yes, but there was also this strange kind of peace creeping in. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and gentle, almost like a whisper reminding me that maybe I was going to be okay. I remember thinking, he's out there building a new life, and here I am, standing in the ashes of the old one, trying to figure out how to start over. And somehow that thought didn't crush me this time. It actually grounded me, because I knew I couldn't control what he was doing or what had already been done, but I could control what I did next. And that realization, that quiet acceptance, was the first real breath of healing. That's what January was for me. Not easy, not pain-free, but a whole lot lighter. It was the month I started to look forward instead of just looking back. It was the month that I realized that surviving wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of finding myself again. The letter and reflection. Let's talk about the letter I read on the podcast this past Tuesday, the one I wrote to my husband. I'm not going to read it again today because it was super long. If you want to hear the full letter, you can go back and listen to Tuesday's episode, but it was just too long to put it in this one again. But I do want to talk about what that letter meant to me, because it wasn't just words on paper. It was truth. It was grief, and it was anger, acceptance, and release all tangled up together. Here's a glimpse of what the letter basically said, without reading the whole thing to you guys again. It was me saying that I wish things had been different. I wish the promises we made had actually been the ones we kept. That I had known he was unhappy, and that I had been given the chance to try to fix what was broken instead of finding out when it was already too late. It was me admitting that love without honesty isn't a home, it's just a performance. It was me forgiving what I could and finally deciding to stop carrying what wasn't mine to hold anymore. It was me choosing peace and releasing the version of him and the version of us that I had been holding on to. I was sitting at my desk when I wrote it. It was quiet that night. One of those cold evenings in January where you can hear the house breathe. And I remember my hands were shaking a little bit as I typed because even though I knew I needed to write it, it still hurt. Not because the words themselves, but because of what they meant. That I was finally accepting that what I had believed, what I had fought for, what I had built my entire life around was over. When I finished, I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. I didn't cry the way I used to. These were different tears, softer, quieter, the kind that come from somewhere deep inside when you finally stop fighting the truth. The kind that say, okay, I'm ready to let go now. I think what broke me most, more than the affair itself, was knowing that he went outside of our marriage while he was still in it. He didn't come to me and say, I'm unhappy in our marriage and we need to talk about it. He didn't give me the chance to try. He just found what he was looking for somewhere else. And that betrayal, it's not just about cheating. It's about the silence, the lack of honesty, the absence of respect for what we had built together. Because I would have done anything to fix it. I would have gone to counseling, changed what needed changing in myself, met him halfway, all of it. I would have done all of it. But instead, I was left trying to piece together a truth I never saw coming. And I'll be honest, I'm not innocent. No marriage ends because of one person. There are so many things I could have done differently, moments I wish I'd handled better, words I should have said. And I own all of that. But nothing prepares you for the kind of pain that comes from being blindsided by betrayal, because it makes you question everything, not just your relationship, but yourself. It makes you doubt your worth, your instincts, your memories. You start wondering if any of it was even ever real, or if you were just the only one who believed in it. That letter was the first time I told the truth, not to him, but to myself. It wasn't about changing his mind or reopening the door. It was about freeing myself from the story I'd been stuck in. It was me saying, I see what happened. I accept what I cannot change, and I'm not going to carry it around with me anymore. Because healing doesn't always mean getting closure from the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's finding peace in your own words. Sometimes it's realizing you don't need them to make it right. You just need to make it right with yourself. And I was finally beginning to understand that. The Chicago Healing Retreat. When I think back to January, one of the most defining moments for me that month was the healing retreat I went on in Chicago with Dr. Kristi. She's my chiropractor and she's also my acupuncturist, but honestly, she's become so much more than that. She's been a huge part of my healing journey. I didn't really know what to expect going into that weekend. I just knew I needed something, a release, a reset, maybe even a reminder that I was still here, that I still had a body and a spirit underneath all of that emotional weight I'd been carrying. We spent that day doing everything from body work to deep emotional healing, massages, energy work, steam therapy, all these things designed to help your body let go of what your mind keeps holding on to. But what I wasn't prepared for was how intense it would feel when those emotions finally started coming out. By the time we left Dr. Lamont's office that night, I felt emotionally raw, completely exposed. It was like everything I'd been pushing down for months had suddenly come to the surface, and there was no pushing it back anymore. Before we went to the hotel, we stopped somewhere to eat that evening. And on the ride there, I sat in the back seat. On the way up earlier that day to Chicago, I'd been in the front seat, but something in me knew I needed the space that night. And thank goodness I did sit in the back because I cried the entire way. It wasn't loud crying, but it was that deep, guttural kind where your soul aches, where it feels like something inside you is being ripped away, even though you barely make a sound. The kind of crying you can't stop, and honestly, you don't even want to, because you know it's finally time to let it all out. I cried the whole drive to the restaurant. I cried after we ate. I cried the whole way back to the hotel. And when we got there, I didn't stop. We were all staying in the same room that night, and as soon as we walked in, it just hit me. I broke down. I remember Dr. Kristi looking at me and saying softly, "You need to ground yourself." She told me to take off my shoes, to stand on the ground with my bare feet, and to raise my arms in a Y, and to just let it all out. So that's what I did. Right there in the hotel room, I stood barefoot, arms raised towards the ceiling, tears streaming down my face, and I let myself feel. For the first time in months, I didn't try to hold it together. I didn't try to be strong. I didn't try to stop the tears or make sense of them. I just let them come. It was one of the most emotional nights of my life. Dr. Kristi and the others decided to go out for a bit later that night, but I couldn't. I was completely spent, emotionally and physically drained like I had never been. I took a shower and I cried in there too. You know, sometimes the sound of the water makes it easier to just let it all go. That was me. I cried until I had absolutely nothing left in me. And eventually, I crawled into bed, and you know what? I ended up crying myself to sleep. Even the next morning, I still felt heavy. I felt tired, but also lighter in a strange way too. Like my body had released something that had been trapped inside for far too long. I remember thinking, maybe this is what healing actually feels like. It's not peaceful and it's not pretty. Sometimes it's messy and loud and full of tears, but you wake up the next day feeling just a little bit more like yourself again. When we went back to see Dr. Lamont the next day, Dr. Kristi told him about how emotional I had been the night before, and I'll never forget what happened next. He walked over to me, put his hand on my arm, closed his eyes, and just stood there. No words, just this long, silent moment where I felt completely seen. Not as a patient, but as a person who was breaking and healing at the same time. After a few minutes, he looked at me and said, "You are strong. You're going to be okay. You're going to make it through this stronger on the other side." And something about the way he said it, I believed him. That drive home from Chicago was quiet. I didn't cry as much as the night before, but I could still feel the emotion sitting heavy in my chest. That feeling where you know if someone said the wrong thing or played the right song, you would just lose it again. But I also felt stronger. It's hard to explain, but it was like something inside me had shifted, like I had finally released just enough pain to make room for something new. On the drive, we passed a town that brought back a flood of memories, Bolingbrook. It's where my husband stayed one season when he was working out of town. It's just outside of Chicago. Years before, I had driven up there for a long weekend to visit him. Just me. I didn't bring the boys. It was just a weekend for us. My mom stayed at home with the boys, and it was just him and me for a few days. I remember that weekend. We laughed, we explored Chicago, and it was so fun. And for a few days, it actually felt easy. It felt like love. Driving past that same hotel on the way home, seeing it from the highway, because you could see it right from the highway, it hit me like a wave because it wasn't that long ago. Just a short few years ago, we were there together. We were happy then, or at least I thought we were. It's crazy how much life can change in just a few years. That drive was quiet, but my mind was loud. I thought about all the versions of us that used to exist and how I was finally saying goodbye to them. Not with anger, but with sadness and gratitude and something close to acceptance. But by the time we pulled into town, I felt wrung out, but I also felt peaceful. Like I had finally taken the first real step towards letting go. It didn't mean the pain was gone, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to feel it. And that alone felt like progress. What healing looked like that month. Coming back home after that weekend in Chicago felt different. It's hard to describe, but I felt lighter, like something had been lifted, even if I couldn't name exactly what it was. There was still sadness, of course. There were still moments where the memories hit hard, or I'd feel that ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But underneath all that, there was this quiet strength starting to build. It was the kind of strength that didn't come from pretending I was okay, but from finally admitting I wasn't and realizing that that was okay too. January was the month I started to see glimpses of myself again. Not the version of me who was married or the one who was just surviving after everything fell apart, but me. The woman who loved her kids fiercely, who found peace in the quiet, who didn't need to rush the process or prove anything to anyone. The woman who was learning that healing isn't something you achieve, it's something you have to live through, one honest day at a time. I started doing small things that made me feel grounded again. Simple things like morning walks with my dog, writing in my journal before bed, taking long showers where I'd let the hot water run all over me until my thoughts finally settled. There were days I'd listen to music, songs I used to avoid because they reminded me of him, and instead of breaking down, I'd just listen. And sometimes I'd even sing along, and it didn't sting the same way anymore. I started to notice the quiet moments that used to feel lonely were now starting to feel peaceful. I could sit in my house without the TV on, without trying to fill every silence, and just be. That was new for me, to sit in stillness and not immediately feel sadness. It felt like breathing again, but this time without heaviness. And I remember thinking, maybe this is what healing really looks like. Not a dramatic turning point or some big realization, but all these little moments that start to stack up. All of these small signs that the worst is behind you, even if you're still walking through the middle of it. I think we all want healing to feel magical, like one day we just wake up and everything's okay again. But that's not how it happens. Healing is slow. It's subtle. It's learning to find joy in the smallest things, like a morning coffee, a conversation that makes you laugh, the sound of your kids in the next room. To forgive yourself for staying too long, to stop replaying every what if and start saying, even so, I'm still here. That month, I started to see that surviving wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of rebuilding me. And that's a really powerful shift because for so long I had been in survival mode, just trying to make it through each day without falling apart. But by January, it felt like I was slowly stepping into something new. I wasn't fully healed, not even close, but I was present. And that, I realized, was the real work. Healing didn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It meant learning to carry it differently, with grace instead of guilt, with awareness instead of anger. It meant understanding that pain doesn't disappear, but it does transform. And every time I chose peace over bitterness, every time I chose forgiveness over resentment, I could feel myself coming back to life a little more. There's this quote that has always stuck with me. Sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go, it's learning to start again. And that was January for me. I was learning to start again. And it wasn't perfect or easy, but it was real. I could feel the ground under my feet again. I could feel my breath steadying. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that better days were coming. Closing reflections and a call to action. Looking back on that month now, I can see it so clearly. January was the month I started to breathe again, yes, but it was also the month I started to believe again. Not in him, not in what was lost, but in me. And my ability to rebuild, to keep going, and to find my own rhythm again after all the noise had faded. For so long, I thought healing would feel like a destination. Like one day I just wake up and feel better. But now I know healing is quieter than that. It's softer. It's those tiny shifts that happen inside when you least expect them. It's realizing you didn't cry this morning, or that song that used to wreck you now just feels like a memory. It's finding yourself laughing again, really laughing, like deep belly laughing, and realizing that joy still lives in you even after everything. If you're listening right now and you're in your own version of January, maybe not the month itself, but that season where life feels stripped down and quiet and painfully honest, I want you to know you are not alone. It's okay to not have all the answers yet. It's okay to still cry sometimes, even on the days you thought you were past it. It's okay to be healing and hurting at the same time. You don't have to rush it. You don't have to prove that you're over it. You just have to keep showing up for yourself, keep breathing, keep surviving, and slowly you'll start to feel that same shift. The quiet strength that whispers, you're going to be okay. And you know what? You will be okay. I promise you will be. Because the thing about heartbreak and grief and betrayal and all the pain that breaks us open is that it also makes room. Room for peace, room for clarity, room for the version of you that's been waiting underneath all of that hurt to finally come back to life. So, if this is your January, I want you to take a deep breath right now, wherever you are, and remind yourself that this isn't the end of your story. It's just the part where you begin again. And maybe, like me, you're learning how to breathe again too. One day, one moment, one heartbeat at a time. If this episode spoke to you, I would love for you to share it with a friend who might need it too. You can also follow along with me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Momma Drama and Trauma for more healing moments, behind the scenes posts, and updates on new episodes. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at Momma Drama and Trauma so you never miss a Truth Talk Thursday or a new podcast drop. Your likes, comments, and shares truly help this community grow, so please comment and like this video below. And also, you never know who might need to hear these words today. As always, you are strong, you are worthy, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of you.